Hi, I finally caught up this week with Men, the new film by Alex Garland, writer-director of films including 28 Days Later, Ex Machina, Annihilation, and now venturing for the first time outside of science fiction into more folk horror territory. It's the story of a young woman named Harper who has recently separated from her husband, and he has in fact died in an incident that may have been either suicide or an unpleasant accident. And she has gone off to the country for a recuperative 2 week stay in a country house that she's rented. And at first, it's all very pleasant, very bucolic. The landlord who lives nearby is seemingly quite a friendly type, a bit sort of country fellow, but nice enough. And Harper goes for a walk, and she finds herself being seemingly stalked by a figure of a naked man. When she reports this to the police, they don't seem to take it as seriously as they should, and it gradually emerges that there are forces in some way massing against her. Underlining this is the fact that, aside from the flashbacks to her late husband, all the men in the film are played by Rory Kinnear, with Harper herself played by. Uh, my mind has gone completely blank. I remember the actor's Jessie Buckley. I remember the actor's name in a moment. Um, it's it's very different from Garland's other films. Um, while there is some degree of obscurity in some of his work, Annihilation required you to join the dots together. Men is both more complicated and a lot simpler than it first appears. The film's thesis seems to be very simply that the patriarchy exists, that it enforces itself against women through institutions like religion and the police, excuse me, because the local priest, the local police officer are again these Rory Kinnear figures who um, impose victimhood upon Harper, and that this power structure is obviously incredibly negative, incredibly destructive, bordering on malevolent, rather than simply malicious. But the film's plotting and uh, visual iconography make it much more complicated and much harder to follow than I think it needs to be. We have digressions about the Green Man. We have a moment of Harper looking up into the sky, into the night sky, and it being an absolutely clear view of space and distant galaxies. We have the already well-known final sequence of the movie, which I'll talk about in a moment once we get past the spoiler marker. And the problem with the movie is that although it has a seemingly fairly clear thesis and one which is very hard to disagree with, um, it's it's trying so hard to have lots of interesting visual elements that it just completely drowns out any point that Garland's trying to make. So we have a strong performance by Buckley. We have several strong performances by Kinnear, who gets to play different tones of the same kind of archetypal male figure. And Paapa Essiedu, as the husband in flashback, is also frighteningly convincing as this abusive husband. And I think it's clearly written with a degree of research into the way abusive male partners behave, and very convincing and very unnervingly portrayed. Um, so it doesn't really say anything wildly groundbreaking, but it says it in such an over the top way that it obscures the point that it's trying to make. Getting onto the spoiler element, the final sequence of the film has the Green Man type figure arrive at Harper's house in the middle of the night and give birth to one of the other male figures, who in turn gives birth to the other, and so on through a succession of male births until the last figure being born is the late husband. The final scene of the film has Harper's friend, who she's been talking to over the phone through voice chatting several times, arrive at the house as she's been invited, and some emphasis is given to the fact that she's pregnant. And she follows a blood trail and finds Harper sitting outside the house with a smile on her face. And the film ends. Again, I don't know what Garland wants to say. I don't know what point he wants to make. Um, it's out of step with his other work, not just in terms of genre and tone, but he always seemed to be quite clear in the points he wants to make. Many of his films are about powerful women fighting back against male oppression, and this is true here, but it's done in such a strange, alienating, over complex, over intense way that any food for thought is being forced out of our mouths by bizarre gore effects and elliptical plotting. And the result is, I think, of quite a disappointing, unsatisfactory film, and to date, his biggest artistic misstep.